Everything you've heard about AI for family law is probably focused on the wrong thing. They keep telling you to buy tools and learn tricks that do one thing, but are divorced from your firm's operation. AI is not something you just buy, it's a factory that you build. Here is where that journey starts. Welcome to the Sterling Family Law Show, the show for family law firm owners who want to grow their profits, multiply their cases, and set a clear roadmap on what they need to do to build the firm of their dreams. Listen, this episode is an important one. It breaks down proven business growth, digital marketing, and revenue-first strategies to help you scale smarter and not just be busier. I am Tyler Dolph, the CEO of Rocket Clicks, which is a family law only business growth consultancy that helps family law firms increase profits through full service development. Today, we have the co-founder of our sister business, Sterling Lawyers, Tony Carls, with us to talk about the state of AI in family law right now and the two villains, which is the do everything trap and the duct-taped AI trap, and how to cut through all of the hype around AI by envisioning it beyond a tool you use, but as a factory you build. All right, Tony, welcome back to the show. Big episode today. There's been so many podcasts on AI. Obviously it's a very hot topic right now. And our approach to this, we want to take a bit of a different approach. We're not going to talk to you about what AI is or what a chatbot does. We want to get into the weeds a little bit and talk about how we are using this at Sterling and how family law firms should think about implementing AI in their firms. The first thing we want to talk about is the state of AI in family law. So give us a little bit of just background on what you're seeing in the space and kind of how firms are adopting it today.
Yeah, so I feel like we have a pretty low adoption rate right now. If you look at adoption rate curves that you typically see, we're kind of past the first early adopter phase, which is usually 6% of the population. We have about 20-ish% of family law firms that have adopted using AI in their firm. And those that are really holding a real edge. They're seeing productivity go up. They're seeing their overall revenue increase. They're able to produce more work in their firm for the same amount of time that they're spending, because they're delegating some of the work, some of the admin work, correctly to AI. Us at Sterling, we've implemented a whole bunch of different things to give us different edges. A lot of it's pointed in the sales arena currently in terms of how we do our sets and do our shows and do our follow-up processes so that we can generate more for the same spend that we're currently spending on the marketing place. So we're in the early phases, and those that are adopting are winning, and those that are kind of holding to the old world are experiencing a lot of what I would imagine the people that were in the Industrial Revolution in the early 1900s, they were feeling when, the Model T came out and the assembly line factory manufacturing came out, and just floored at how fast things were happening comparatively to doing it the old way. And I think we're seeing that's being seen across a lot of industries. So there's people that are kind of putting their heads in the sand, or they're pushing on the brakes, and they're losing the opportunity to gain edges when everything's new. And same thing's happening in the family law space, which isn't a surprise. It's how this industry is like every other industry.
Yes. And I think it's understandable, right, in the law space to be skeptical. There's not specific laws in every single county about how to use AI or what AI can do for a firm. But I think we've kind of boiled it down to two main kind of issues or enemies that we're seeing in firms. And the first is the firm's operations still revolve around the owner. So they're doing all of the things and they care deeply about their clients, but they don't have the time to invest. And then the second is they misunderstand kind of what AI actually is. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah, I would say so on the first one, there's because the work isn't over. There's not an emphasis on delegation and elevation in a lot of firms. The adoption is slower because everybody's on their own little island and nobody's working together to kind of grow up out of that. So what ends up happening is if you can start leveraging AI and building skills for particular use cases, that owner or the main linchpin within the firm, they're delegating their internal knowledge on how they do things into essentially an SOP for an AI to run. And it doesn't have to be legal work. And I think some of the fear is the lack of clear guidance available in every state, but there is good guidance from the ABA, and there are different decisions that have come out in different states. Illinois has one that's really strong. Texas does. Florida does. New York does. California does, and they're all similar in different ways. They obviously have different edges for their particular jurisdictions, but getting in the weeds and understanding them, and then understanding how you can leverage AI is really important. And that's going to give you an opportunity that most firms aren't taking advantage of at this point. It's still 80% still are not. I think a lot of that has to do with a misunderstanding of how it works. We're going to definitely talk about this in our upcoming webinar, but there are very specific rules as it pertains to data retention in the legal space generally. And if you're not using the right types of accounts, and we've seen this in our own firm, and I know some of our clients are operating without full scope of investigation in terms of how they're adopting AI in their own firms, is they're really not digging into kind of the data retention policies with the products that they're choosing to use through AI. There's really falls into two lanes. There's consumer grade, and then there's commercial, and those have two very different terms of service. And if you're not understanding what those are, you're gonna put yourself and your clients in a position where you might be violating ethics rules.
Tell us about that real quick, because I know that's an important point.
Yeah, it's like one of the most. It's what's unlocked AI usage for our team is we've fully invested several months into investigating that, understanding it, and then teaching our team about it and how these models work and what data is used and what data is not used in both scenarios. So the consumer grade account, if you look at, OpenAI or ChatGPT as it's mostly known, or Anthropic, also known as Claude, there's two types of accounts. So you have your consumer grade account, which is you can go and you can sign up with just your email and use it for free. You can get a plus version or a max version and get a little more usage out of it. All of that's consumer grade. And it's pretty ambiguous on some of the paid versions, but it's the same terms of service where they're using that data to train their models. So if you're using that, you're very likely crossing ethics rules. There's likely an ethics rule violation that you may be infringing on. On the enterprise grade accounts, specifically to Anthropic, also with OpenAI, if you enter a enterprise account terms of service, that data is now yours. And they're two very different terms of service. They're two very different contracts that you're signing, and they dictate how the data that you are putting into the AI models, how it can be used with the company. So can they use it for data training and modeling, or can they not? So it's really important, and that's what's misunderstood. And just digging into that is really important. And usually and what we've seen is that's the unlock, is attorneys learning how that's being used and kind of digging into it for themselves and understanding how that comports or doesn't comport with their specific jurisdictions.
So the to-do is, if you're using AI at your law firm, ensure that it's on an enterprise account.
Yeah, make sure you are using a business account. So because they're the terms of service are written differently for you. You have more controls, more access, and it's built for enterprises. And these frontier model companies know that if they're going to have business and make their stock dreams come true, they're going to need to give the ability for companies to use these models with their own data retention policies being in place versus being just open to everything being used for model enhancement.
Okay, so we've covered the basics. You need to use an enterprise account. Now, I know a lot of firms are just using the chat function, right? Maybe they're using it to like edit documents or check the content of an email. I think where we've really been successful at Sterling and at Rocket Clicks as well is building what we're calling the AI factory. Tell us about the difference between just using the chat function of AI versus building in, something like VS Code and creating an actual factory that's creating processes and procedures.
Yeah. So most people that are using AI are just using it to prompt in a browser. And like you're definitely getting productivity out of that, but you're really scratching the surface. You're using like 5 to 10% of its potential. It's like you're driving a super high-end sports car and you never switch it out of first gear. It's just always stuck in first gear. You never actually get the benefit. Like you gotta, or you're driving a golf cart and it's just got like some ridiculous regulator on it where it only goes 5 miles an hour. That's basically how most people are using AI today. And that's through just general prompting. And that's useful. It's just a different way to interact with the internet. It's a smarter way to interact with the internet. You get more out of it. So it's not bad. It's like the super basic version. You can progress up this chain of thinking in terms of how you leverage it. So the step up from just prompting is using skills. So a skill is essentially an SOP. If you can teach a human how to do something, you can teach AI how to do something. And it's just a protocol of here's a scenario. When I tell you this scenario, this is how I want you to interact with this scenario. And here's what I want back. It's a skill. If this, then that. It's a basic skill. Then there's a version where you have a little more advanced version of that skill, which is a skill plus tool connections. So you can give it access to different repositories of information, like a Google Drive or like a like an email inbox or whatever, Salesforce, Lawmatic, whatever tool. Like there's tons they're called MCPs. There's tons of ways to connect to these different data repositories, or where you likely have important information that if AI had access to and it had a skill to use it, it could do even more cool things for you. So that would be like the second or the third level. And then fourth would be you start using it really specifically for particular projects. So this is really pertinent in the family law space because all of our clients are projects in and of themselves. Every client is its own project, and you're going to use a lot of skills and the same tools for that project. But now every time you interact with that project, it's retaining the context of the whole conversation. And the next thing that you're asking it to do has the whole history of what you've already discussed and how you're thinking about that particular client and so on and so forth. So it's a bigger learning. So, and it continues to go up until you get to what I would call a factory, which is it is a whole bunch of skills that can loop on themselves. So what a loop essentially is it allows you to create one prompt and then it'll orchestrate a whole bunch of different skills for you, one after the other, until you get an end result. So, we've done a lot with a bunch of different things to enable us to like fully leverage AI. So an example that we have is we used to have roles at our firm that QA'd, did quality assurance on all of our, on a subset of calls for our intake agents. So we have about 13, 14 intake agents on our team. They all answer between 10 and 20, 25 phone calls a day, make 50 to 70 outbound phone calls a day. And then our QA team would score per week, 10 inbound, 10 outbound per agent. And then we'd use that for coaching. Now we get to score every single phone call because we have AI in the loop. So what it can do is we built an AI essentially factory for this system where when a call ends, that gets passed to an AI tool that does the transcription and tone analysis, and then it gets classified as a certain type of call. That call then gets scored against one of 43 different rubrics, and then that gets logged into a database. And then every morning, we get a new report for all calls over the last 7 days for every agent, so we can see how are they performing on their totality of calls. So, and we found some very interesting things in terms of like complying with our own rules, where different agents are struggling with different types of interactions, and it's enhanced our ability to improve our team's performance, because now we don't have those two QA agents. We now have a dedicated person that's coaching, and they have tons of information, more information than they could ever want to coach our intake team. So our intake team is getting better at a faster rate than they were in the past. And this program costs us about $600 per month to run. And it costs us at least $2,500 per person for our offshore QA team in the past. So we're net positive cost. We have way more data, and it's way more meaningful and impactful. And the speed of response is faster than anything we've had in the past. Like, that's an example of something we've been able to build that's add value, it's reduced costs, and it's produced higher results.
And I think if I think about just that one process, right? The 101 version is hire people to listen to these calls and score them. 201 version is I'm going to take the recording and I'm going to put it into AI and I'm going to tell AI, hey, here's the rubric, score against that. And the master's level version is what we're doing is the process is built, it happens automatically, and we get a report automatically generated and delivered to the coach so that they can get the data and deliver the coaching.
Yeah, so that gets delivered at 7 a.m. every morning, and Sydney preps what she's going to talk about in huddle with the intake team at 8 a.m. based on what we got on the report. So because she does training, 15 minutes of training every single day with our intake team. So now it's real stuff, real time, real fast.
So great. I mean, what an evolution, and it happens so fast. And I think the validation that we got was this recent report from Clio stating that AI adopting firms are growing at about 4 times the rate of firms that are not adopting AI. And so it's like everyone's excited about this thing, but I think it's important to realize that this isn't going away and that you have to get on board and learn how to build this factory. Right. And I know you've attended conferences and they're saying the same things. Is that correct?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those that are adopting it, they're seeing significant enhancements. And like, our whole premise is we're not going to use AI to replace people. We're going to use AI to enhance what we're already doing. So, the people that we moved off our QA team, they're now on our intake team. And now nobody's doing the laborious work of sitting there, listening to a 20-minute call, checking the boxes in a spreadsheet and doing it super slow. Now everybody's getting the scores. We're doing the same thing with all the admin work that our intake team has to do. And there's tons of it because we get, 300-ish text messages per day. We get 200 phone calls per day. We get our public office inbox email gets, 70 to 80 inquiries a day of just random, all of it's not quality, but all of it has to be sifted. So we used to have 2 people that did the sifting and just to hand it off to somebody else to do something with it. Now that's just happening in real time, automatically. And like, it's happening at a higher rate with better quality. There's still exceptions. You still got to manage it. But now the team can focus on the conversation and the relationships with the clients, which is what we're in business to do anyway. It's like, how do we empower them with these tools so that they can have more meaningful interactions and better interactions, and like they're improved from an ability perspective. And that's kind of how we're thinking about leveraging AI.
Tony, I love the productivity hack, but I think the one call out that maybe people are afraid to talk about is the fact that as AI adoption continues to increase, especially with consumers, they're going to start to question this hourly billing model. So you're going to be like, wait, why did you take 3 hours to produce this document? I could have done it myself in 5 minutes or whatever. So and for our audience who may not know this, Sterling operates on a flat fee model. And so we're incentivized to be as productive and efficient as possible, right? So AI was a natural evolution for us. For the hourly firms, this is going to be a bit more difficult. What's your perspective on how that's all going to play out?
Yeah, I would. This is my speculation, but I believe it's going to be true, that I do think AI is going to very much disrupt the hourly billing model, because not because it has to, but because consumers are going to start making that challenge. They're going to Everybody's going to get used to knowing AI is involved with business, and then the question of what am I paying for is going to get more intense. And the benefit of so we don't do flat fee, we do fixed fee. So the slight variance there. The way we look at how we do fixed fee is the best corollary is like an underwriting process. It's not underwriting, but there's some similarities and obvious differences. But when a client comes in, we do a huge vetting process over a whole bunch of different variables that might exist in their case. And then we tell them based on an uncontested route, negotiated route, and a route that gets contested, that progressive path over 3 stages, how much it's going to cost them in totality. And then we have to, prove that we did the work that we said we were going to do. But that's how we communicate with the client. Here's all the things that we're going to do for you based on your scenario. And then we go to work. We don't have that hourly billing challenge. Doesn't matter how long it takes us. That's always been our premise, is like, we are going to put ourselves out there to say, here's how much this particular thing is going to cost. And then our job is to effectively do it, which is in the direct opposition of the hourly model. So because we don't get to skimp on quality, because if we do, we're going to get malpractice claims. Like this is the perfect industry to do this in, because if you screw around and don't do a good job, you're going to lose your law license. So a fixed fee model really puts the onus on the firm to identify where are the opportunities for me to delegate and elevate and use my team as best as possible, and to create operational efficiencies throughout the process of a divorce, for instance, so that we can make profit. AI is just going to enhance that for us. All it's going to do is make that whole premise better. Where our perspective at Sterling is like, this is going to really inhibit those in an hourly basis, because now the question of what am I paying for? Why is this taking so long? All of those things, that's really going to become more front and center, because everybody's going to start expecting AI to be involved, and that's going to create this like weird scenario where why aren't you using AI, and why am I spending all this extra money? It's going to create all these uncomfortable conversations that are going to be hard for you to honestly answer with authenticity, versus just a nice, good rote response. So I do believe it's going to be important. We're not there yet, because overall adoption of AI is pretty limited. I think the joke currently is most people are using AI to create funny pictures of their mother-in-law or father-in-law for their kids to color. But the reality is, like, this is coming as a significant impact on businesses, and like those they're seeing the benefits already. It's definitely having a force multiplication impact.
Now's the time to think about it. And I felt like today we talked a little bit high level. We got in the weeds a little bit. We are going to be doing a whole series on AI for family law firms. Our next episode, we're going to tackle AI policies and show you how to protect your license, your reputation, and your client data while still adopting AI. We touched on that a little bit today, but we're going to go deep into that topic in our next episode. Tony, always beneficial. Appreciate your value and your time. And we'll look forward to seeing you again very soon.